Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a poor woodcutter and his two children, Hansel and Gretel. The land had fallen on hard times, and food was scarce. Their stepmother, unable to bear the hunger, convinced their father to abandon them deep in the woods, hoping they would never return. The siblings Hansel and Gretel trudged through the forest, their hands clasped tightly. Their father had led them into the woods with empty promises, his voice weighed down by something more than guilt. When he left, they waited, but the hours stretched into the night, and the truth settled in. They had been abandoned. Hansel, ever the protector, had dropped small white pebbles along their path. But when they attempted to retrace their steps, a thick fog had descended, swallowing their trail. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, their bodies weak from days without food. They wandered aimlessly, the darkened trees looming like twisted figures, whispering their doom. Then, like a beacon in the void, they saw it. A house standing impossibly bright against the dreary woods. Its walls were made of gingerbread, its windows glistened with sugar, and its roof gleamed with frosting. The scent of caramel and cinnamon filled the air, wrapping around them like a warm embrace. Desperation overpowered caution. They ran to it, their hands clawing at the walls, mouths sinking into the sugary wonder. The door creaked open. An old woman draped in rags peered out. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes, dark and sunken, gleamed with a knowing smile. "Poor children," she crooned. "Come inside, before the cold takes you." The house was even stranger on the inside. Candles burned with an eerie blue flame, their light casting long, shifting shadows. The air was thick with the scent of roasting meat, though no fire crackled in the hearth. Hansel and Gretel were given warm beds, and for the first time in weeks, they felt safe. That night, the old woman brought them platters of food, steaming stew, fresh bread, and spice cakes. But something in Gretel's bones warned her. The way the old woman's eyes lingered too long, the unnatural sweetness of the meat, the way the walls seemed to breathe in the dim candlelight. She did not eat. Hansel, starved beyond reason, devoured his meal. He moaned at the taste, the richness of it, the way it melted on his tongue. Gretel's stomach twisted in revulsion. The days passed, and Hansel was fed well, but Gretel noticed something horrifying. He grew stronger, his skin ruddier, his hunger insatiable. He was changing. Then she found the truth. A room hidden behind thick velvet curtains. A table, knives, and bodies half-carved, stripped of flesh. Human. The old woman was feeding them human flesh. Gretel recoiled, bile rising in her throat. The stench of rot clawed at her senses. Her mind screamed for her to run, to leave, to pull Hansel away from this place. But when she turned, the old woman stood there, her head tilted, her smile widening. "Now you understand, child." Gretel shook her head, her hands trembling. "No, you're a monster." The old woman only laughed. "A monster? No, my dear. This is your legacy." And then, the final horror. "Your grandmother! Your father's mother!" Hansel and Gretel's blood ran cold. The witch spoke of their heritage, of a curse in their lineage. Their father had abandoned them, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear of what they would become. The hunger, the craving, it was in them. Given time, it would awaken. Unless they chose another path. Gretel refused to let it take them. That night, she whispered her plan to Hansel. He listened, but his hunger clouded his judgment. Still, she made him swear, a solemn vow never to eat human flesh. They would kill the old woman, cleanse the house, and never succumb to their cursed bloodline. And so, they did. Hansel and Gretel set the house ablaze, its sugary walls melting like wax. The witch's screams were lost in the crackling flames, but rather than leave, they stayed. They rebuilt the house, filling it only with sweets. Cakes, chocolates, and fruits lined their shelves. They vowed never to harm another soul, to live a life free from the stain of their lineage. Years passed. They grew into adulthood. They found love. Their home, once a place of horror, became a haven. They made it a sanctuary for lost travelers, offering them food and shelter, ensuring no one else would know hunger as they had. Yet despite their best efforts, the whispers of hunger always lingered in the back of their minds. They held strong, together, for they knew that the moment one of them wavered, the other would fall. And so, they vowed never to separate. But fate is cruel. Gretel's death was sudden. A storm, a broken bridge, a fall into the churning river. She had been out gathering herbs. A simple task. But the wooden bridge beneath her feet had been weakened by the rains. She fell into the rushing waters, screaming for help. Hansel arrived too late, pulling her lifeless body from the river, his hands shaking, his breath ragged. And standing on the riverbank was her husband. Gretel had always spoken of her husband with admiration, assuring Hansel that he would always protect her. But in this moment, Hansel saw only failure. Why had he not been there? Why had he not saved her? The doubt festered like an open wound. His grief curdled into rage. His mind, always poor at judgment, latched onto a single conclusion. Gretel's husband had let her die. The hunger stirred. Hansel did not sleep that night. The whisper of the house called to him. He sat in the darkness, eyes hollow, body trembling. He had promised, he had vowed, but Gretel was gone, his anchor, his guide, and there was nothing to stop him anymore. His sister's husband was the first, then another, and another. The more he ate, the more the house changed, the more it breathed. Its walls grew warmer, richer, pulsating like flesh. It accepted him, molded him into something else. Hansel's body stiffened, his skin hardening like baked dough, his veins thickening with molten sugar. His breath grew slow, his limbs fusing into the very walls around him. The hunger had consumed him, not just his mind, but his flesh, reshaping him into something monstrous. The house shuddered, absorbing him, welcoming him home. Hansel became the house. He wove his sister's memory into its very essence. Sugar crystallized into hair, syrup formed delicate lips, and marzipan molded into pale hands. The house pulsed and shifted as if alive, and from its depths, the new witch emerged. She was not merely a doll of candy, but something more. She spoke with Gretel's voice, whispering lullabies to the wind, her dark eyes glinting with something unnatural. She was his creation, his sister reborn in sugary perfection, yet twisted by the hunger that had consumed him. She stood at the doorway, waiting, and as lost children wandered near, the house exhaled, releasing the scent of sweet promises into the air. The cycle had begun again. Thank you for joining us in the world of Twilight Fables. If you enjoyed this tale and want to hear more stories like this, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more.